Hello, history buffs, time travelers, and scholars. Epic battles often leave us amazed by their action-packed moments, heroic warriors, and grand victories. But what happens after the dust settles and the cheering stops? The aftermath of these clashes can be just as intense, filled with the chaos of wounded soldiers, broken cities, and lasting scars on history. When the clash of swords fades and the battlefield grows quiet, what's left behind is often a haunting and tragic sight. Famous battles like the Battle of Hastings, 1066, the Battle of Waterloo, 1815, and the more recent Battle of Stalingrad, 1942-43, have shown us that the aftermath of war is as significant as the fighting itself. Broken weapons, shattered shields, and the lifeless bodies of soldiers and animals scatter the ground, painting a grim picture of victory or defeat. The once deafening noise of battle is replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the cries of wounded men and animals waiting for rescue or for death. Nature, indifferent to human struggles, takes its course. Crows and vultures descend on the battlefield, scavenging among the fallen. During the Battle of Gettysburg, 1863, in the American Civil War, for example, it's said that the overwhelming stench of death lingered for weeks as the sheer number of casualties, over 50,000, made recovery efforts nearly impossible to complete swiftly. As night falls, shadows emerge across the battlefield. These are not thieves or desperate survivors, but work parties sent by armies to clean up the gruesome remains. Soldiers, often in specialized units, are tasked with burying the dead, recovering valuable equipment, and tending to their wounded comrades. After the Battle of Agincourt, 1415, during the Hundred Years' War, King Henry V's forces spent days collecting their fallen and disposing of the bodies of enemy soldiers to prevent disease. But the chaos doesn't end at the battlefield. The ripple effects of war spread far and wide. Villages and towns near the fighting often bear the scars as well. Homes are destroyed, crops trampled, and families displaced. After the Battle of the Somme, 1916, in World War I, nearby towns like Albert and Bapaume were reduced to rubble, and it took decades to fully recover from the destruction. The psychological toll of war also lingers. Survivors, both soldiers and civilians, carry the weight of what they've endured. In ancient times, victors often paraded prisoners or spoils of war through their cities, while the defeated struggled to pick up the pieces of their lives. For example, after Rome's victory in the Battle of Carthage, 146 BCE, the entire city was razed, and its survivors were enslaved, leaving a chilling legacy of total destruction. The aftermath of a battle reveals the true cost of war, not just in lives lost, but in the emotional and physical scars it leaves behind. These moments of quiet devastation remind us that even the most glorious victories come with a heavy price. The wounded, winning a battle, is more than defeating the enemy. The aftermath brings another kind of struggle. Soldiers must confront the grim task of tending to the wounded, a process often as chaotic as the fight itself. After battles like the Battle of Gettysburg, 1863, or the Battle of Waterloo, 1815, armies scrambled to save as many lives as possible, knowing that each soldier rescued could strengthen the army for future conflicts. As soon as the fighting stops, idle soldiers are sent out to comb through the battlefield, searching for their injured comrades among the countless bodies. For some, every second means the difference between life and death. Those who can walk or have minor wounds are treated on the spot by medics, while others with more serious injuries are placed on stretchers or loaded onto wagons and taken to makeshift hospitals. In the Napoleonic Wars, surgeon Dominique Jean Larrey revolutionized battlefield medicine with the invention of flying ambulances to quickly transport the injured, saving countless lives. However, the medical care available often depended on the time period and the resources of the army. In ancient battles like the Battle of Marathon, 490 BCE, the wounded were left to the mercy of basic first aid, with limited understanding of infections. By the time of World War I, advances like antiseptics and blood transfusions had greatly improved survival rates. But even then, soldiers with severe injuries often faced amputation or long recoveries. The process of treating the wounded could stretch on for days. After the Battle of the Somme, 1916, field hospitals worked around the clock, often overwhelmed by the sheer number of injured. Some soldiers would take weeks or even months to recover, while others would never fully heal. For many armies, saving wounded soldiers was as much about strategy as compassion. Every experienced fighter who returned to the ranks reduced the need for fresh recruits and lengthy training programs. In addition to medical care, officers faced the grim responsibility of accounting for the casualties. Centurions in Roman legions, for instance, would conduct head counts to record the fallen and wounded after battles like the Battle of Cannae, 216 BCE. This task was not only about maintaining order, but also about honoring the dead by ensuring their names were remembered. The wounded were often a reminder of the human cost of war, and their recovery or loss shaped the morale and future of entire armies. While history books often focus on the victors and strategies, the real stories lie in the struggles of those who bore the physical and emotional scars of battle. The dead. While part of the army focuses on treating the wounded, others are tasked with collecting the dead, a duty considered both sacred and essential. The ancient historian Onosander explained why this was so important. The general must ensure the dead are buried promptly, whether in victory or defeat. This shows respect for the fallen and sets an example for the living. If soldiers see their comrades left unburied, they fear the same fate awaits them, which can hurt morale. In Roman times, leaving the dead unburied was seen as dishonorable. Wise generals always ensured the fallen were treated with some respect, even in challenging circumstances. During peacetime, each soldier would receive a proper burial. However, after a large battle, practicality often overruled tradition. Rotting corpses posed serious health risks, so mass graves or large cremation pyres were commonly used to handle the dead quickly. Roman soldiers even had a system to prepare for their death. Many voluntarily set aside part of their pay to ensure they'd have a tombstone if they died in service. Their comrades would then organize a proper ceremony, even if their remains couldn't be recovered. Thousands of these tombstones have survived, providing a glimpse into the lives of Roman soldiers. They often list not only the soldier's name and rank, but also details about their family and achievements. One famous example is the tombstone of Marcus Caelius, a centurion from the 18th Legion who died in the disastrous Battle of Teutoburg Forest, 9 CE. His tombstone was discovered centuries later, detailing his age, rank, and bravery. After the battle, Roman general Germanicus revisited the site years later to ensure the proper burial of the fallen, including Caelius. For high-ranking officers and generals, burials were much more elaborate. These leaders often received grand funerals shortly after the battle, with the entire army participating to honor their service. Heroes of the battle, even if they were not high-ranking, might also be given special recognition. For example, Gaius Cratinus, a centurion who bravely led a charge during the Battle of Pharsalus, 48 BCE, was buried with military honors by Julius Caesar, who even built a special tomb for him. Rarely, large memorials were built to honor the fallen. One remarkable example is the monument Emperor Trajan built at Adamclisi to commemorate a battle. It included the names of 4,000 soldiers who died, with ceremonies held to honor their memory. Inscribed on it were words of gratitude, in honor and memory of the stoutest men who died fighting for the Republic. Caring for the dead after battle was not only a practical necessity, but also a way to maintain the morale and unity of the army. For the Romans, it was a reminder of the sacrifices made and the respect owed to those who gave their lives in service. The enemy wounded. What happened to the wounded on the enemy side? Their treatment often depended on their status and the nature of their injuries. Some were cared for, only to be taken as prisoners or sold as slaves. Healthy captives fetched high prices in the markets. Those with severe injuries, however, were often killed on the spot. The Romans didn't show much respect to the remains of less civilized enemies, leaving their bodies to decay. But enemy nobles received entirely different treatment. They were valuable as hostages for ransom or as tools for political negotiations. For instance, during the Second Punic War, Scipio Africanus freed Massiva, the nephew of Massinissa, as a gesture to win over the Numidian prince's support. Captured enemies were sometimes used in prisoner exchanges. However, there were notable exceptions, like after the devastating Battle of Cannae, when the Roman Senate refused to pay ransom for soldiers who had surrendered. Romans also made efforts to track and recover enslaved citizens during peace talks. Unfortunately, their enemies often weren't given the same consideration and were mercilessly sold into slavery or paraded as war trophies. The equipment, after the dead and wounded were tended to, another group of soldiers got busy with the legion's gear. Broken weapons and armor were gathered, repaired, or repurposed as quickly as possible. Fallen comrades were stripped of their equipment, and even enemy weapons and armor were collected, sometimes used as trophies or for emergencies. After the Battle of Cannae, Rome even resorted to reusing enemy gear displayed in temples to equip their legions. It was common for battlefields to be cleaned of anything valuable within days. Broken weapons, arrowheads, and other damaged items were often discarded, making these the most frequent finds on excavated battlefields today. Complete swords or helmets are incredibly rare since they were either reused or looted by grave robbers over the centuries. The loot. One of the most anticipated post-battle activities was collecting loot. This process was carefully monitored by the general staff, as all battlefield spoils officially belonged to the general and, by extension, the state. Soldiers were required to hand over anything they found, which was later distributed as cash or rewards after being processed. Despite this rule, many soldiers secretly looted when officers weren't watching. Small items like jewelry, weapons, or even cloaks were especially prized because they were easy to hide and valuable in markets. Occasionally, larger items, such as furniture or saddles, were stolen, though carrying them home without being caught was a challenge. Tensions sometimes flared when soldiers felt cheated out of their share. For example, after the Battle of Cynocephalae, Roman soldiers were angry that Aetolians had taken most of the loot. While soldiers were usually forbidden to take battlefield loot freely, on rare occasions generals allowed them complete freedom to keep their spoils as a morale booster. However, this practice often led to disputes among soldiers and officers, causing internal strife. Roman discipline was legendary, but there were moments when the promise of loot tested its limits. When officers tried to enforce strict rules, some soldiers revolted. How generals handled these mutinies is another fascinating story, one worth exploring further. The aftermath of an epic battle was often as complex and intense as the fight itself. It was a time for tending to the wounded, honoring the fallen, and salvaging what could be used to sustain future campaigns. From the burial rites of Roman soldiers to the handling of enemy captives, every action was guided by strategy, discipline, and sometimes brutal pragmatism. The stories of soldiers looting for survival, generals balancing loyalty and state obligations, and even the tensions that arose over dividing spoils offer a raw glimpse into the harsh realities of ancient warfare. These moments remind us that victory on the battlefield was only the beginning. The aftermath carried its own battles, against disease, against the discontent of soldiers, and sometimes against the delicate balance of morale and leadership. They paint a vivid picture of life in ancient Rome, where every decision could have lasting consequences, not only for the army but for the entire republic. If you found this journey into the post-battle world of the Romans captivating, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you the most about the way Romans handled life after battle? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history, culture, and the untold stories of the past. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thank you for joining us on this exploration, and we'll see you in the next video.